You're in your 50s, your peak earning years. You finally have the time and money to do the things you've always wanted to do. But have you kept up with saving for retirement? You can do that and still have the fun part of being 50 plus. Today, we're talking about how to plan for retirement in your 50s. And I brought on someone new for today's show, Patrice Sikora. You might remember my producer, Eric Johnson. He and his wife felt called to join a nonprofit ministry in their hometown. So I'm thankful for 3.5 years now of Eric's contributions, excited for their next adventure, but also happy to welcome Patrice as our new producer. Patrice, thanks for helping with the show in the background, but here you are helping us on air as well.
Absolutely, Jeremy. Wherever you need me, I'm here.
You got it. And we brought you on today to talk about retirement planning in your 50s. You share with me, you've got a little bit more experience planning for retirement within your 50s than I do. Just tell me, how did that go for you?
Well, let me put it this way. If I had known then what I know now, I would have done things quite differently. I really
Well,
would. 50s are a great time, but you got to still pay attention to reality.
yeah, and, of course, reality is a lot of times dollars and cents, which isn't so fun to deal with day in and day out. But if you take the time to deal with it at least a few times a year, you can feel confident in all the fun things you're doing the rest of the time. So we've got 5 steps to go through. Put together 5 things that if you're in your 50s, you really ought to be going through. I'm going to say in order. Actually, go do these in this order.
All right. Well, then let's start with step one. I think
Good
it's
place
called
to
catch up.
start.
Yes, catch up.
Yep. We all like ketchup. Well, I don't like ketchup. I'm a mustard guy.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, of course. But when you hit 50, you can save even more money with catch up contributions. So catch up contributions. And here's the theme kind of retiring in your 50s. We'll give you the steps, but here's really the theme, and this is why we started with that catch up contributions is you're in your peak earning years. You probably have the highest income you've ever had.
Jeremy,
And
hang
I'm
on, hang on. I am hearing something when you speak. Go ahead,
Yeah,
talk.
okay. Yep.
There is something. It's when you're speaking.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I was wondering about something, and that's really what it was. It's like it turns on. It's almost like it turns
Yeah,
off and turns on.
yeah.
Yep.
Do you have a noise canceling function on?
I don't think so. Let me look at
Because sometimes that brings up,
audio settings. So I've
yeah,
got, and does it have to do with the speaker somehow? I wonder if it started when I stopped using the because I can put on the headset.
I
Let's
it's
do the
so
headset.
strange. It was so strange. I didn't hear it when we were just talking, but then we were going back and forth. When you were just speaking all by yourself, I could hear it.
Let's do the headset for right now. I think that might be helpful.
No, I'm hearing it.
I haven't
It's
switched it
like
yet.
it's like white noise,
Yes. Yes, it is. Yep.
and it's
Okay.
there.
Yep. Well, I'm on the headset and I'm looking here. I've got, and everything's the same as before. I've got it plugged directly to my computer. It's not going. I've got the AG06. It's not going through my docking station. I've got original sound for musicians, which is recommended for studio environments.
Were
I've
you
got,
using that before?
yep. Yeah, I've got high fidelity music mode. Here's maybe what it
Try
is.
try no music mode. What's
Here's
the other option?
I've got echo cancellation. I wonder if
No,
that's it.
that may be it exactly. That's
That
it.
might have that might have been it. How am I sounding right now? If I'm talking, do you hear
Still
anything?
there. It's still there.
Still there. All right. I'm gonna take off high fidelity, which really high fidelity is supposed to make it better.
No, it's there.
Okay, yeah, that is odd. I'm gonna look at some advanced settings here. Echo cancellation is auto. Signal processing by Windows auto device drivers, audio device drivers. I can leave it on or I can do off.
Ah, there you go. That
All
did it.
right, but now it's switched to noise suppression.
It's okay. I'm
So
not hearing
apparently,
it, and you sound a little bit richer actually.
all right. So we're taking off the.
What was that you took off?
So it's called signal processing by. I'll take a screenshot for you. Uh, and it's in the So if you have anything else going for other people.
Yeah, I haven't had this before, but I want to know. Signal processing.
Yep. I'll send you the screenshot, but it was
Okay.
in advanced on there. And I'm going to turn back on high fidelity. How's that sound? And I'll leave echo cancellation and stereo audio off because I don't think that would be helpful. If I can see
Yeah,
high
I
fidelity.
don't hear anything, any difference.
All right. So I'm going to leave. I'm going to put this back in my screenshots. All right.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, tech team, for listening to all this.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we're still on recording.
Still recording. Have not
Yep.
stopped.
Okay. All right. I guess let's
Do you want to take it from the top or do you want to take it from step one?
take it from step one.
Okay.
Well, let's take it from the top because why leave that bad
Yeah,
audio
that
in there?
sound, there's no need to. Okay. Now that we know what it is.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Okay. Here we go. You're in your 50s, your peak earning years. You finally have the time and money to do the things you've always wanted to do. But have you kept up with saving for retirement? You can do that and still have the fun part of being 50 plus. Today, we're talking about how to plan for retirement in your 50s. And I brought on someone new for today's show, Patrice Sikora. You might remember my producer, Eric Johnson. He and his wife felt called to join a nonprofit ministry in their hometown. I'm thankful for Eric's contribution for the past 3.5 years now, excited for their next adventure, and happy to welcome Patrice as our new producer. Patrice, thanks for helping out with the show in the background. And here you are helping us out on the air.
Jeremy, I'm here to do whatever you need me to do.
Well, appreciate that. And you do a great job. I've heard great things from friends of mine in the podcasting world, and I've listened to some of your great audio. You can tell you've been at radio for some time. I think just from your voice and your
Oh
demeanor,
yeah.
you've had
Oh
some
yeah.
experience in radio. Yeah.
Quite a number of decades. We'll stop it there.
That's fine. Well, speaking of experience, that's why I wanted to have you here on the show. Is we're talking about how to plan for retirement within your 50s. You've had the chance to plan for retirement within your 50s. How did that go for you?
To be quite honest, if I'd known then what I know now, I would have done it much differently. Much differently. I would have paid more attention to what I should have been doing.
Yeah, well, that's why we're talking about it. And I think sometimes as you're just going through life, if you don't have a process or a guide for a new situation, it's a little bit more difficult. And that's what we're trying to share today. Is here are 5 steps. We put together 5 steps to go through for planning for retirement in your 50s. And really, why it's so important is, like we said, it is probably your peak earning years. You've probably had more money than you've ever had before. You might even have less expenses than you've had before. I'm fairly certain you're done with childcare, and you might be done with your college costs at least by the time you're 60. So you're faced with all this time, all this money, and the problem could be is that you spend more time on having the fun with the money and less time on the planning for the money. And of course, we like to have fun, but at the same time, without the planning, you might create some extra worries that you don't necessarily need to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now you say you have 5 steps, and if I had had this roadmap, I think it would have been a lot more, a lot less stressful. Let's put it that way. So why don't you start with step one?
Yeah, that's part of what we're trying to do is just reduce the stress of retirement planning, reduce the stress of your life. And of course, I just saw something, Patrice, just this last week. I've got to share this, where it's said that the average American doesn't consider themselves old until they're 52. Now, whether that's true or not, I mean, it's on average, it must be true. Let's focus less on maybe a term like old and focus on a better term, which is opportunity, because there's a lot more opportunities for saving for your retirement once you turn 50. You might have heard of these things called catch up contributions. When you
Mhm.
hit 50, you've got the chance now to add extra money into your 401k, extra money into your traditional IRA. And we'll talk about something called a health savings account, HSA, in a second. But let's just go through these real quick. In 2023, if you're saving in a 401k and hopefully you've got some great pay raises along the way, maybe you have less expenses from the kids. Hopefully they're, paying their own way now. You might have the chance to max out your 401k, which for 2023 is $22,500. That's a lot of money. But if you turn 50, then you get $7,500 more. If you're 50 plus and you're working and you have a 401k, you can now put $30,000 into that 401k. That's just an extra amount, extra ability to be able to save for retirement during your peak earning years.
And if your employer matches, do they match that extra catch up or not?
Yeah, so that's it's plan dependent. So I'll tell you that it's plan dependent. But typically, when it comes to I'm putting in a certain percentage of my income, the employer's coming in and matching a certain percentage of your income. I've got a bit of a feeling if you're putting in 22,000 or $30,000, you might be putting in a higher percentage than where the employer is actually matching. So I would take the best guess that you're eligible to get matching on it. Chances are, though, you're maybe maxing it out to the point where you've already gotten the most. But look into that, because every 401k, these dollar amount contribution limits, those are government created. This is applying to everybody, but each 401k has something called a summary plan description. We encourage everyone to look at that so that they know exactly how their own personal 401k plan works, because that works different from company to company. I like that question. That's something to look into, and just make sure if you're owed that matching, you're getting that matching amount.
Definitely.
Now the IRAs, it's a higher amount this year in 2023, where it used to be 6,000 you could put in. Now it's 6,500. But once you hit 50, it's an extra 1,000. So that's 7,500 that you could put in towards your IRA. Now, if we're talking a married couple here, and you're both working, and you're both 50 plus, and you both have that 401k, there's a chance you can put $75,000 towards your retirement, right? 30,000 each of you for your 401k, 7,500 each of you for your IRA, whether that's traditional or Roth. And of course, there's all kinds of limits and things along those lines, but there's an opportunity for a married couple to put $75,000 toward tax advantage investments. That's a great part of turning 50, is you have this extra ability to put extra money in.
That is a substantial amount that is extra too. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. It's a big help for the good savers or the people that are catching up. A lot of times in your 50s, you're kind of catching up on the savings that you wish you had done when you were younger. Now, I teased and talked about that HSA health savings account. Here's what's interesting is I wish they made it easier with everything being consistent, but the government doesn't like to do that. It's 55 plus. So you've got to be 55 plus to put in that catch up contribution for your HSA, and it's only $1,000. So it's kind of like the IRA amount, except it's 55 plus as opposed to 50 plus. So look into that HSA, because you might be newly able to put in extra money into that health savings account. And we talk about that one. The health savings account is the best tax situation account you can find, because you get a tax deduction on the way in. As the money grows, there's no taxes while it's growing. And when you take it out for the eligible health costs that they count for, it's tax free that way. There's no other account that's kind of triple tax free if you look at it that way. So that actually might be the first place to look, is if you're 55 plus, see what you can do to max out that HSA.
Awesome. That is so awesome. Now, all right, what about lifestyle creep? I've heard this phrase. What do you mean?
Well, you think about it. After that first step is making sure you take care of your savings. The second part is really looking at your spending. Your choices on how you save, how you spend in your 50s are going to determine basically the rest of your life investments of how your retirement might look. And just think about it. You've worked hard, you've raised your kids, you're at the top of your job. You probably think you deserve that vacation, that car, that fancy dinner, that home remodel. And I'm not saying that you
Darn right we
don't.
do. We're
Yeah,
darn
yeah,
right.
right. Uh, but at the same time, two things happen. If you're spending the money, you're not saving it, and you're just getting used to spending the money. I've heard people that are 60 years old. And they say, well, I just bought a new car, so I don't have to plan for that in my retirement. Wait a second. You're not going to get one new car, one used car even for the next 25 years?
I
That's
don't
not
think,
the case, right?
unless you
Or
want those QQ plates, right?
yeah, it's just it's how's this gonna work out? So if you are kind of increasing the level of vacation, the level of car, the level of dinners over and over again, you hit retirement, you're kind of used to that higher spending amount. It feels like a loss if you're dialing it back. And so it's good to take vacations. It's good to have some fun, but at the same time, if you ramp it up too quickly, right? If things just ramp up too quickly for your spending, you get used to it. You've got this double-edged sword where you're not saving enough. You're getting used to the extra spending. That's the thing called lifestyle creep. Lifestyle creep. You've got to make sure to uh, be aware of that, and that's why we talked about the savings first. A lot of times when we're doing retirement planning, we talk about the spending first. I wanted to talk about the savings first because if you save in that 401k at work, if you save through those HSAs, where a lot of times you can take it right out of your paycheck, if the money doesn't hit your bank account, you probably can't or don't spend it. And so, one way to avoid the lifestyle creep is to just make sure that you're saving as much as you can in your eligible and all these different places that you can save.
If you don't see the money, you won't miss it.
That's exactly it. And sometimes people are worried about missing out on things. That's why they're going through and having the fun in their 50s, and that's good. But at the same time, it's interesting. I spend a lot of time thinking about talking about longevity, and there's a lot of studies that show that you will spend more time in retirement than you expect, where you oftentimes retire earlier than you expect, and you oftentimes live longer than you thought you would live during your
Mhm.
retirement. And retirement's supposed to be fun. You can spend your 50s dreaming about your retirement. What type of retirement do you want to have? But while you're dreaming about that fun retirement, I'd like you to do some research on how can we make this retirement dream work. And especially if you often retire earlier than you expect, don't think of a retirement age as in I'm retiring at 65 on the dot. In your 50s, you're still 5, 10, 15, 20 years away from retirement. Think of an age range of when you would like to retire so that you kind of have a zone, a target on there. Be prepared for what age range you might want to retire as opposed to one specific date. And there's a lot of kind of danger. We're going to talk about that throughout today. There's some danger in a way to say, okay, this is our one specific date, as in if that's the end all be all, because there's a lot of, I guess, misconceptions or things that you can do that harm yourself when you're thinking that there's one date that kind of changes everything. So that's part of your research and dreaming. I'd say part of your dreaming is thinking about not a specific date, but an age range. Part of your research ought to be, well, what does your Social Security look like? Right? You're coming up on your Social
Yes.
Security
Yes.
age in 5 years, 10 years. Uh, Go through it's ssa.gov and model out how your Social Security changes based on when you retire and how long you're working, right? If you are working at the age, if you're 50 and you're working till you're 60, you're definitely not turning on your Social Security at that point in time. So how long you're working and when you turn on your Social Security are two different things. So model out, and there's sliders. You go to ssa.gov, you log in, and there's these sliders you can kind of move around, right? You can plug in, what if I make 50,000? What if I make 100,000? Really model out, how does your Social Security look? Because you might be somebody that already has 25 or 30, almost 35 years by the time you're in your late 50s of good working years. And your Social Security is based on the top 35
Mhm.
years of your earnings. So your extra working might not affect your Social Security all that much. Meanwhile, you might be like my wife. So Robin, my wife, she took 11 years off to watch our kids while they're growing up. Well, now she's back in the workforce, and by the time we get to be 60, she's probably not going to have 35 years worth of really high earning years. She might only have 20 years. and 15 zeros. If she's got 15 zeros in her high earning in this calculation, every extra year of working will be an extra bit of help, a bigger help percentage wise to her Social Security than me, for example, where I'll have the 35 full years of earnings inside of there. So go ahead and model, how does working or not working actually help my Social Security? And that might give you an encouragement to retire early because you've kind of put in your time, or it might give you the encouragement you need to keep on working because,
Right.
oh my goodness, this is a big help to you. So now you've got your age range, you've got kind of your Social Security income ranges of how things would work. Really, you've got to kind of put those together and say, well, what if I retire at 60? What if I retire at 65? Right? Whatever your age range is, and what's the income I can get? And I'll tell you right now, if you retire earlier, it'll be a lower income. If you retire later, it'll be a higher income. I think that's something we can all just understand without even looking at the numbers. But what's that difference? It
Right.
might be such a large difference that you say, boy, I wanted that age range. I wanted to retire earlier. I just can't. I need to keep on working. It might be an encouragement to keep on working. Or you might look at those differences and maybe you've got big Social Securities, big pensions. There's still people retiring with pensions where your working might only give you a couple $100 a month. And you say, why am I going to work for 5 more years if it only gives me a few $100 extra per month in income? So looking at that age range, figuring out how your Social Security working really come into play. And then what's that income level? Because if it's a big difference, you might want to keep working. If it's a small difference, maybe you do want to retire early, and maybe you can retire early. But if you didn't do that research, if you didn't look for that ahead of time, you just wouldn't have that knowledge. You wouldn't be able to make the decisions that you want to make as you're approaching retirement.
And research, that is your point number 3. We've had the catch up contributions, point number 1. Point number 2, avoid lifestyle creep. And 3, research, research retirement.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And part of this research, I'll share this with you, and I mentioned it earlier. If you ask a 58-year-old, when are you going to retire? They'll probably tell you about 65. Now go ahead and ask a 65-year-old, when did you retire? They'll probably tell you 62 or 63. People retire right now in America. People are retiring a couple years earlier. And it's been like this for years. People retire earlier on average than they expected. So you ought to be prepared for that situation. You ought to be prepared for retirement several years ahead of time. And I mentioned about that one specific date. A lot of times people think I'm retiring exactly at 65 or 62, whatever that age is. And it's almost as if they don't want to plan or don't think they have to plan until they hit that age. Well, you ought to be ready for retirement a few years before you plan for it, because on average, that's likely to happen. And there's a few different reasons. If you kind of asked America, why do people retire earlier? They would probably say, well, a health change. And they're right, except it's a health change for their parents. When you're
Yes.
60, your parents are probably 85 or so. And that's the prime time where you might be thinking, I need to dial down my work or retire to take care of mom or dad. Or you hit 60 or 62 or so, and there's a recession or there's a reduction at work and you've lost your job. And it might be a combination of, I don't feel like looking for another job. Might be a combination of, hey, I'm 60 and not as many people are willing to hire me, despite how wrong and illegal it is, right? That seems to be the reality from what I hear, is that there seems to be less job opportunities when you hit that age. Or you just say, well, I was out of work for a few months and I kind of liked it, right? A job loss and your parents' health are the things that often get you to retire earlier. So that's part of the research, is knowing not just what my plans are in a perfect world, but kind of what's reality, what often happens for other people. And let's be prepared, because that just might happen to me, right?
Right. Right. How about point number 4?
Yeah, this is a interesting one, because a lot of times when you're planning for retirement, you are thinking of, how do I get my investments ready? And we'll get there. I'll give you a preview. That's number 5. But oftentimes, everyone thinks, you might be thinking, the first thing I need to do to get ready for retirement is get my investments ready. Well, we've already gone through without really talking about investments. It's about your savings, it's about your spending. It's about getting ready for retirement. And when you get to the fourth step, it's get your insurances ready for that last decade of your career. And
Hmm.
insurance is important in the beginning part of your career. You might have a new house, a new spouse, new kids, right? You ought to be having things like term insurance, disability insurance. And you get to a certain point where you feel like, oh, my house is paid for. My kids are out of the house. I don't need these insurances anymore. Well, insurance is there to protect someone who's going to be missing out on your income if you're not there. And you might still have a someone. That someone might be you, right? The older we get, the more likely we are to become disabled. And if you're 55 and you're at your peak earning years and you're planning to retire for the next maybe 10 years from now, you might not have all the money that you need for the rest of your life saved up. You might need to protect yourself by still having disability insurance when you're 50 and 55 and 60. I'm not saying you have to have it. I think you ought to consider it, as just because I've maybe had some expenses go away doesn't mean I don't need that particular insurance. And the same thing with life insurance. Just because your mortgage is paid for, just because the kids are out of the house, doesn't mean you have a spouse that doesn't rely on you, right? Especially if there's a high difference in income, right? There might be a high difference of an income, and your spouse's retirement is really based on you maxing out your 30,000 a year in the 401k. If you're not going to retire for 10 more years and you die, that's 300 grand that they're not going to get the opportunity to have you work and save. You might still need some life insurance at that point in time. And there's another insurance that's kind of new. It's not new in general, but it's kind of new to your life stage, right? When you're 35 and 45, you're probably not thinking of long-term care insurance, but you get to be 55, you're probably thinking about long-term care insurance. And we've got some episodes, we'll put those in the show notes that talk about long-term care insurance specifically. That's something that's maybe a new bill, maybe a new insurance that you want to go and get, but definitely look into it. This is the time to really get ready for the last decade of your career.
And with people living longer and longer, that long-term care insurance is becoming more and more important in a lot of cases.
That's exactly it. There's reasons called long-term care, and when
Yes.
people live longer, they're more likely to need that care because they've lived longer, and they're more likely to need it for a longer amount of time. So definitely look into the long-term care insurance. There's someone named Dave Ramsey that a lot of people have heard of, and he said a lot of people tell me, "Hey, Dave Ramsey said I should buy long-term care insurance at the age of 60." So, well, actually, let's look at the book. I've got the book in my office. The actual quote is, as you reach age 60, as you get to age 60, you should look into buying long-term care insurance. And he wrote that in 1998. It's been
Oh,
25 years since he wrote that. And the two pieces of it is it's as you approach age 60. And if you're in your 50s, you're approaching
approaching.
age 60. Go ahead and start looking into it now. And just, economically, the long term care insurance world has changed a lot in the 25 years. And the sooner you look at it, the sooner you get it, if you're going to be getting it, the better off you'll be. So definitely don't wait till you're 60 to look into long-term care. Follow Dave's advice of as you approach 60, go ahead and look into that long-term care insurance.
All right, now you promised us you would talk about investments
The
for
most fun
retirement.
part of savings, right, is let's go make a lot of money with investments. That's what people want to do. And that's maybe the issue is as you're approaching 60, as you're approaching retirement, uh, a lot of times people have that date in mind or that belief in mind if I'm just going to be growing my money until a certain date, and then everything's going to switch on that date to where it becomes income, not growth. We think you should begin to adjust your investments for retirement in your 50s. I met a lot of people in the summer of 2020, right? Remember what happened a few months earlier.
Right.
But in summer of 2020, a lot of people I met were coming to us because they thought, I'm going to retire in a year or two. And I'm just going to keep on growing my money until that date. And then I'll just switch it to income. Well, guess what happened in March of 2020? The stock market dropped by 30%. And they freaked out. They pulled their money out. They went to cash And when the market went up 20% in 3 days, they were in cash. They lost
Yes.
money
Yeah.
because they made an emotional decision because they had a plan that didn't quite match with reality. And the reality is, you might retire a few years before you plan to. The reality is, there might be some shock to the stock market where the market drops a couple years before you hit retirement. That's why we like to call it, it's a term called a glide path. You kind of smoothly are sailing towards retirement. It's not a matter of everything's one way and then you hit that specific date and then it's a different way. That's just not how uh, it works in reality. There's another term called the retirement danger zone, or I've seen it called the retirement risk zone. My favorite is Prudential, is a insurance company. They even trademarked this. It's called the retirement red zone.
They
And that's a
trademarked
they
that?
trademark it. Go to their website. You'll see a TM after the three words retirement red zone. And good for them. And I think it's a great
Yep.
analogy. Most people have seen NFL football. Most people have seen that there's this thing called the red zone. And if you're on defense, you're in trouble if the other team is in the red zone because they're getting closer to the end zone. And it's not a guarantee that they're going to score, but there's a big likelihood and it's a bigger problem, right? If they score in the red zone because they're closer to that touchdown, they're closer to the point where they're hurting you more, and that's what happens as you're approaching your retirement. They call that retirement red zone because as you're getting closer to that retirement date, the risks are greater, right? If the market drops, like these folks I'm talking about just now, the market drops right before you hit retirement, that's a big problem. You're probably more emotional about your investments when the market drops right before retirement. So you need to adjust your investments as you approach retirement. It's not do one thing and then flip a light switch and it's completely something else. Maybe you are putting your new contributions into something that's safer. Maybe there is a point in time when the stock market's really high. So you're taking some of your profits. You're taking kind of some chips off the table. You probably ought to adjust and change your investments during your 50s, but don't do that just because I said so, right? Don't change your investments until you have a plan. You've got to make sure you have a plan about when do you need the money? How much do you need? What could go wrong? Once you have that plan, that's when you can go ahead and adjust those investments. And we'll have these 5 steps. We talk about the 5 steps here. Uh, we'll have those on our website. It's retirement-reveal.com. And of course, if you'd like more ideas on how to make your retirement great, go ahead right now and click that subscribe button. Patrice, thanks for coming on today. We helped
Sure,
everyone
man.
go through these 5 steps, figuring out how to plan for retirement in your 50s.
This was fantastic, and I look forward to working with you.
It's going to be fun, and thanks for helping us out. Thank you for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. We believe if you know more about your money, you will feel better about your money and you will make better money decisions.